Namaste and greetings. I, Dr. Sauravi Himire, Research and Communication Associate at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. We are gathered today for day one of a 3-day online certificate training program on implementing rainwater conservation, practitioners' perspectives on rainwater harvesting and efficient local water governance and resilience. This training course is organized by National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, and Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, or CECCSD, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. The patron for the program is Shri Taj Hassan, IPS, Executive Director, NIDM, New Delhi. Our convener and moderator is Shri Tikender Singh Panwar, former Deputy Mayor, Shimla, and Senior Fellow, IMPRI. Our conveners are Professor Anil K. Gupta, Head of ECTRM, NIDM, New Delhi, Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director, IMPRI, Dr. Soumyadeep Chattopadhyay, Associate Professor, Vishwabharati Shantiniketan, Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI, New Delhi. The course will be conducted by various expert resource persons comprising eminent academicians, journalists, senior researchers, and policy practitioners. The distinguished resource persons have great experience gained in the field along with the expertise. Our experts for our course are Professor Anamika Barua, Dr. Indira Khurana, Dr. Jenia Mukherjee, Dr. Fauzia Taranum, Anjali Makhija, Dr. Brajesh Kumar Dubey, Shri V.R. Raman, Shri Ranjan Panda, and Professor Arun Kumar. Our organizing team are Dr. Sweta Bedyadas, NIDM, Dr. Sauravi Himire, Utkarsh Dwivedi, and Dia Goswami, IMPRI. Now, let me give a brief outline of this specially curated course on this very topical issue. In India, rainwater harvesting has been practiced for more than 4,000 years. It is a simple process of accumulating and storing rainwater. Rainwater harvesting systems since the ancient times have been utilized for various purposes, such as for drinking, irrigation, and for livestock. But due to the increase in land pressure, like the growth of cities, clearance of forests for agriculture in the countryside, and increasing urbanization leading to concentrated population density, has resulted in a rough drawing of groundwater. This is ensuring in drought and drying up of riverbeds at places where domestic and industrial use of water is rising. The extensive and unplanned usage of groundwater distributed the natural water table and has made the groundwater contaminated, and in many places, totally unfit for any use. The groundwater in such areas required to be immediately left to revive. Collecting rainwater and harvesting water runoffs in such areas surely would minimize the risk of the future population. This training program aims to create a platform for professionals from various backgrounds and other experts to discuss information from multiple agencies and exchange experiences to help participants face their water management challenges and disseminate the knowledge gained to increase community awareness of rainwater harvesting techniques and applications. This 3-day online training program intends to bring together professionals from academia, civil society, and business and entrepreneurial sectors to begin a critical conversations about our times. The ultimate purpose of this program is to develop a group of practitioners for mainstreaming sustainable and affordable rainwater harvesting in urban India. It also aims to create a platform for professionals from various backgrounds to discuss information from multiple agencies and exchange experiences to help participants face their water management challenges and disseminate the knowledge to raise community awareness for rainwater harvesting techniques and applications. We are very grateful to the NIDM team and particularly Professor Anil K. Gupta and his team and Tikender Panwarji for spearheading this timely training course on the topic of rainwater harvesting and local governance. I welcome all of you for this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts in understanding emerging issues concerning the impacts of policies in disaster management and helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course, which we believe will lead to a very fruitful outcome. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be Q&A session after each presentation. Share your question on the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee, and please ensure that your questions are precise. And also refrain from making any general comments in the questions to save time. Now, I would like to welcome Shri Tikender Singh Panwarji, our course moderator and convener, to share some words before we begin with our expert sessions. Sir, over to you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Solvi, and I am extremely apologetic that since I'm traveling from Indore back to Delhi, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reserve my comments for tomorrow when I join the session once again. And I would request you to just go ahead, just make a few comments before we start the session, because many of the participants must have, I mean, I'm not sure whether they were there in the previous training session when we organized this session on the heat wave in the country. And I think that when we are talking about heat waves and rainwater conservation, it all speaks about the interdisciplinary and integrated approach that we have to look at local governance. For the simple reason, because the way we have, and you rightly pointed out, in fact, this class that I did of the urban elected people in Indore, I mean, they were from different towns and cities of North India, almost 50 of them. And in fact, I started from Mohenjo-daro, you know, one of the finest designs and planning models that we have inherited. Unfortunately, in the due course of time, we did not actually develop it further. But the point is that you know, we have been doing this. It's not that something that we're discussing now is coming out of a blue moon, but you know, it's a kind of continuity, and it's a kind of a process that we have to actually revisit for a simple reason, and that goes and to the whole process of urban planning, the way we have been actually planning our towns. Particularly, I'm really emphasizing for the period from post 1990s, what we call neoliberal capitalism in India, where you know, massive land use changes taking place, and where the driving force and the only mantra that was actually taught, professed, and you know, eulogized was that we have to attract investment, and all these investments will further will decide the future course of our urbanization. But we have seen, I mean, this is not a sustainable model. I mean, the day before yesterday, when I was traveling to Indore, Zirakpur was flooded. It took almost an hour for me to consider one of the cleanest cities. Just recently when it rained, it was flooded. So, I mean, we name it now. Lucknow, we've seen, I mean, pictures where, water had inundated many of the streets. So, and particularly the design of our streets and the flyovers that we are constructing. So, and this all leads to
Sir, are you there? Jitendra, sir?
I think we've lost him.
Yeah, I think the connection must not be that great at the airport right now. So I think we will move ahead, and tomorrow sir will join again and will deliver us a short lecture on our theme. So moving on to our first session of this training course. So let us start our program now. The first distinguished expert for this session is Professor Anamika Barua. Professor Barua is the professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, Guwahati. Ma'am, we welcome you to this program, and the floor is yours. Professor Barua. Professor Barua, are you there? Professor Barua, can you hear me?
Maybe somebody can just call her and see.
Dr. Arjun? Dr. Arjun?
I'm joining the link that you have
Yes.
shared.
Some technical glitches.
I'm actually
Okay. Ma'am is with us. Meanwhile, she's connecting. Maybe there's some technical error. This will take another 1 or 2 minutes. Please be with us. In the meanwhile, I'll just announce the experts for our 3-day training online program. For today, we have Professor Anamika Barua, Dr. Indira Khurana, and Dr. Jenia Mukherjee. For our next set of sessions for tomorrow, we have Dr. Fauzia Tarannum, Anjali Makhija, and Dr. Brajesh Kumar. And for third day online training, we have Sri V.R. Raman, Sri Ranjan Panda, and Professor Arun Kumar. Let me remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be Q&A session after each presentation. Please share a question on the Q&A box only. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. And also ensure that the questions are very short and precise in order to save time. And kindly refrain from making any general comments. Also, from the participants, if anybody wants to ask direct questions, they can raise hands and we will call out the names one by one and they can place their questions in front of the experts. Otherwise, you can just type the question in the Q&A box.
Dr. Gimre, in the interest of time, if we can wait for another minute or maybe then switch the order.
Sure, ma'am.
Your participants are also there. So
Yes, ma'am. We'll just wait for another 1 or 2 minutes. Then we will continue the session probably with our next expert.
Some internet issues there.
Okay, Dr. Arjun.
Okay, Indra ma'am, would you like to go?
yeah,
Trying to
I
reach
can,
to ma'am, but she's not responding.
Oh,
And plus, I think there's a mic error for her. So I think we can.
Okay, then let us start with
Just a minute,
Dr.
give me 1 minute.
Indira,
1 minute.
or shall we wait for 1 minute?
The ma'am is saying that there's some problem. She cannot hear anything.
Okay,
Just wait for 1 minute.
for 1 minute. Okay, we'll wait for 1 minute more.
Yeah, ma'am is joining.
Okay, great. Professor Barua, can you hear me? Professor Barua? There is some major technical glitch, but ma'am's with us. She's trying to connect her audio.
let us start with Indra ma'am. We can start with the introduction, sorry.
Okay. All right. So our first expert trainer is Dr. Indira Khurana. Dr. Khurana is Vice Chair at Tarun Bhagat Singh Alwar. We welcome you, ma'am, to the program, and please take over the session.
thank you, Sauravi. So I have 20 minutes for the presentation.
Yes, ma'am, 20 minutes and rest for the Q&A round.
Okay. So first of all, a big thank you to IMPRI and to NIDM for giving me this opportunity to share some of my experience and understanding on how water conservation and water management is important for developing resilience against climate change. And I just like to tell the IMPRI team that whenever I see the stuff you're doing, being associated with you off and on, it gives me great pleasure. And yeah, I feel really good about this. So please continue doing what you all are doing, and you'll do it so well. So I'd just like to, today I'm going to tell a story. It's like a story, and it's a true story from the states of Rajasthan and Maharashtra. And I'm going to focus more on what was done there and a little less on the problems and the challenges and the impacts of climate change, because I think that is, we are experiencing it also, and there will be other people who share the evidence, what the evidence is saying about climate change. So I will focus more upon two experiences and how that could help us develop resilience. And as Vice Chair of Tarun Bharat Sangh, it is always. So as Vice Chair of the Tarun Bharat Sangh, I invite you to see the work in Maharashtra, and as Chairperson of Indian Himalayan River Basin Council, I invite you to see the work that I'm going to describe about Rajasthan. So you can see for yourselves, have your own understanding, learning, and even suggest to us how we can improve the work that we're doing in these extremely difficult and challenging environments. If Arjun could show me the next slide, show us the next slide. Yeah, so if you talk about the impact of climate change, I think it's now more than clear that it's almost all about water. It's about the water cycle. It's about the changes in the water cycle. And it's about, when these changes take place, what is the kind of impact that you're getting. So because of the heat, because of the increasing temperature, the glaciers are melting at an accelerated rate, which means there is chance of glacial lake floods. There is more water coming into the rivers, into the glacier-fed rivers. And then once the glaciers melt away, then the rivers have a possibility of running dry. Sea level rise because of the as the temperature is rising, the water is expanding, and so there is a sea level rise. This is leading to submergence of coastal areas and erosion of the coastal areas. We have an increase in the duration and in the intensity of floods. There is increase in droughts. You now have drought and floods in areas where earlier you did not have these kind of extreme phenomena. And there's been a rapid increase in extreme weather events, and especially in the last 2 years, if you see, all across the globe, and especially the coastal regions of India, tropical storms, cyclones, and we are seeing huge cloudbursts across India. So in so many cities and states, we are reading that, the monsoon, which was spread over 10-15 days, is now, that amount of rain has come within 1 day or 2 days. And then that puts tremendous pressure on the infrastructure system and the absorption capacity of the water absorbing systems that we have. If we could go to the next slide. In fact, we go so far as to say that climate is water and water is climate. I'm not going to get into that today, because there's other things that I want to discuss with you. And as Sauravi mentioned in the beginning, climate change is kind of a quote unquote new villain on the block, because we're already in a water crisis situation. Sauravi already mentioned about, the floods and the drought, and how we've kind of forgotten the traditional water harvesting systems and rainwater conservation system that we had, practiced. This country had practiced for more than 4,000 years, and which was dependent on taking the local ecology into consideration before these structures were planned. So we have the excuse me, declining water tables, we have polluted groundwater. If you read the Central Groundwater Board's reports, yeah, you would really get scared and think twice before you have that second, sip of water, because we're not treating the water for all the pollutants that we are adding into the water. It's almost impossible to do that. Our rivers are drying up and are polluted. Our riverbeds are encroached upon. There's an increase in urban flooding and increase in the area under flood and drought, as I mentioned earlier. And we have the dubious distinction of being the largest groundwater extractor in the world, and almost all of our rivers are in crisis. And if moving forward, if you want to focus on climate change adaptation and developing resilience, this is a chance for us to correct all these mistakes that we've made, how we have ignored nature over the past several decades, and try to do a correction which can at least reduce the intensity of the challenge of the impacts of climate change. If you go to the next slide, I think when we talk about resilience, and like I mentioned before, it's almost all about seeing how we manage water and our hydrological cycle. And for this, it's important to understand the groundwater and the surface water relationships. So for example, if you're looking at rivers, so rivers and the groundwater aquifer share a mutually beneficial or a symbiotic relationship. When your groundwater bhandar is full, or when your groundwater aquifers are full, then they provide base flows to the rivers in lean season. So when the monsoon is over and it's like the summer months, so it is these full aquifers which will provide a minimal flow in the river. And similarly, when there's rain, then when there's monsoon, then it is the river and the floodplains that have the water, which will then enable recharge of the groundwater. So when these two are in good condition, then both water resources are like vibrant, they are available. But once if we over extract our rivers, or we kind of don't allow the river to flow, then this balance between the two is disturbed. And for example, if we do over extraction of groundwater, it can no longer provide base flows to the river, and then that leads to drying up of the river. Similarly, if we have over extracted our rivers, we have encroached on the riverbed, we have done unnecessary diversions, then the rivers are dry and then they don't provide the necessary recharge to the groundwater. So maintaining this relationship between groundwater and surface water is incredibly important. And also from the climate change perspective, if our rivers are, if the river bed is there, if the land that belongs to the river continues to be with the river, then it reduces the intensity of the floods also, because it acts like a sponge. So the excess water that has come in a cloud burst to some extent will be absorbed by the river and the floodplains, and then the impact will be minimized. If we go to the next slide, so what I was describing was an ideal scenario when the two are kind of, both are in good shape. And yeah, so this is what the conclusion here to draw is that if we don't take care of both these resources and this connection is snapped, then we have the situation where we have scarcity on one hand and we have floods on the other hand. And the unfortunate part in our cities is that we don't look at the drainage pattern. So when we have, increasingly as it is, lesser amount of rain is causing an increase in the flooding of the streets. So that's one situation. We don't have a drainage system where the water can go. We have encroached on our lakes. We have concretized the entire area. We have removed the tree covers. So there's no place for the water to go. And then coupled with a sudden cloud burst. So then the situation is tends to get even more dismal. Coming to the next slide. Yeah, so I think one point that we need to understand that if we want to develop resilience and we want to adapt to the challenges of climate change, we must allow our rivers to flow and the ecosystems need to be revived and regenerated. And this is not something that's impossible to do. The two examples that I will share with you is as examples of exactly how this is done. And we really need to consider our groundwater aquifers as banks. Actually, those are the reserve banks of Reserve Bank of our country. So that should be the ideal Reserve Bank of India. So that, you know, it's like when you are in crisis, then you draw upon our the groundwater. But we are in a scenario where even in the Ganga, Ganga River basin, where there's so much of water, there is already water scarcity, there's groundwater drying up. So somewhere we have not got our water management right. If we go to the next slide, I think we can, this is about coastal areas. So it's just that another reason why we need to let our rivers flow, because they carry the sediment, from the origin to the confluence with the sea, and they take the silt with them, and that is deposited on the delta. That kind of safeguards the deltas from being submerged. So again, that is a cushion against sea sea ingress into the land areas, and it also provides the necessary nutrients. So this is another reason why our rivers must be allowed to flow. The next slide. Okay, so here I come to the examples. The first example is around the rejuvenating of Agrani River in Sangli district of Maharashtra. This is a river in the West Sangli, which is drought prone. And this region gets its rainfall from the returning monsoon. It is in the rainwater, in the rain shadow, in the Shen Rajo shadow region. So this is a river which is 105 kilometers long. It is shared between two states, Maharashtra and Karnataka, and there are 107 villages along this river. And rejuvenation on this river began in the year 2013. So there's a very interesting anecdote about this, when this rejuvenation of this river started. Rajendra Singh, who has founded Tarun Bharat Sangh and who has revived about 7 rivers in Rajasthan. So he had attended a public meeting in Pune, and he was talking about this successful work in Alwar and other districts of Rajasthan. And then after his talk, a group of people were sitting and informally discussing with him, and they challenged him that you keep talking about the rivers, which you have revived in Rajasthan. What about the dead river in Sangli? What about the Agrani River? What can we do about rejuvenating that river? So he said that I will help you do this, but you take up the primary responsibility of seeing that the work begins on rejuvenation of the river. So the ball was back in the court of these people who had kind of challenged Rajendra Singh. So the next slide. So basically what they did is then this happened in Jan, then in February, they all sat in the dried riverbed. Some of them sat, villagers came and sat there, and they said, okay, now what do we do about this Agrani River, And then they realized that, some people are saying that it's rained at night, but there was no water when we woke up in the morning. And downstream, they were saying that, oh, our roads are flooded. So then they took a walk along the river to the origin of the river. And then they realized that the top, 20, 30 kilometers, is a very steep slope. So when it would rain, the water would rush down, that would flood the lower villages, and there would be no water upstairs. So it just brought out the fact that you first need to know your river. You need to know the local ecology, the local topography, before you do any kind of planning. So they started, the first check dam was built in Balauri village. So they started work on that. The community was first hesitant. Then 3 people contributed. They took loan and contributed. And so when the first check dam came, then the monsoon came, then the water came, then the wells were recharged. So then slowly other villages also kind of said, we also want to do this. They were also successful in building a partnership with the local government and the district administration. So while some check dams and water conservation structures were built with financial support from the community and Tarun Bharat Sangh, a large chunk of them were also built by the Maharashtra government. Also, streams and nalas feeding into the Sagrani River were widened, they were cleaned up. And it's important to realize that a river system is like our arteries and veins. You know, like in our fingertips, we'll have like thin arteries and veins. And gradually, as we go towards the center of our body, they meet other arteries, they become bigger and larger. Same way, a river also gets its flow from the streams and the nalas. The next slide. So this is a visit we had done in June, end of June this year. So the monsoon had, because it's in the rain shadow region, the monsoon was expected in August or September. But there were some showers that happened, and the reason why the showers happened is also linked to the previous point. I said that water is climate and climate is water. Because as you bring in some water, as the forests regenerate, they attract the clouds, and they attract the clouds, and the clouds, what do you call it? The rainfalls. It's not that it's, you know, mahal bana hai barish ka par badal aage chale gaye. That is not the kind of situation that happens. So the check dam was overflowing, and yeah, there are two pictures of two different check dams, and the river was flowing in a perennial manner. So I would really like to invite all of you to just come and see the work there, see the community there, see how the agriculture has changed. A lot more needs to be done because water has come, but to be water secure, then there are a whole lot of other things that you need to do. And that means, how are you going to use that water? You know, one should not go get a kind of over ambitious and over extract the water, because again, then you'll back in the situation where you have water scarcity. So water management and its use is equally important. And realizing that what we are doing now is forming an Agrani river parliament, where we are looking at getting people from each village. So they meet and they decide how this water should be used, what are the do's and don'ts, so that this river can be, can flow for forever. If you go to the next slide. So yeah, I'll then quickly move on to another example. This is of the Sherni River in Rajasthan. This is work that Tarun Bharat Sangh has done in the districts of Karoli, Dholpur and Kota. And first I'll just describe the conditions. As you can see here, this is a ekdam rocky area here, Aravali Hills ka. And it's not possible to see, but towards the end where you see the forest, there's a small johar constructed there several years ago, which has led to this forest in the hills. So because this work has been done several years ago, so this is an extremely difficult area, both in terms of the geology and also in terms of the community that is here, because it's adjacent to the Chambal area. And because there was no water in this region, communities here were extremely marginalized, and they had to resort to a life of crime, because if they had to bring food to the table and if they had to kind of survive, and their families could survive. So it was, I mean, one has to understand the bebasi and the lack of opportunities, why people took this kind of life. And they also share how they're constantly living under this, under a sort of being caught and jail and then bail and then expenses and then anyway, so that was the kind of cycle that they were perpetually in. And then Tarun Bharat Sangh started interacting with people in some of these villages, and some of they found traction in some of the villages. Some of the people were interested in getting their water resources back, because there was no water, there was migration, there was petty crime, there was working in illegal mines, which was causing silicosis, and treatment of silicosis only was taking a huge chunk of the money that they were earning as working as labor, or even in the mines. But when I spoke to them, one of the team members from Tarun Bharat Sangh said it took 2 years to convince the people. So we need to realize that it takes time. These are process driven. If you want sustainability, you have to focus on the process, and you have to understand why people are saying no or why they're hesitant. Oftentimes, people have had very bitter experiences before, even under NREGA or some, local government funding, or even some civil society organizations. So they're very hesitant to open up to new interventions. And all the interventions here have been with 1/3 contribution from the community and 2/3 from Tarun Bharat Sangh. Though the terrain is rocky here, what's important is to understand is that the sedimentary rocks have fractures. So they have horizontal fractures and vertical fractures, which allows the rainwater to percolate downwards and sideways. So if the water conservation structure is built in one village, and if it rains, then the water is going down to almost 25 villages, which is what they kind of shared with us. And it's also contributing to the flow of this Sherni River, which is a tributary of the Chambal, which in turn is a tributary of the Yamuna. So because of this work that they've done in these villages and these 3 districts, there is a boost in agriculture, in the productivity of the milch animals. Forests have come alive, biodiversity, you can see it's all visible over there. If you go to the next slide. So these are just some of the structures. The one on the top left is a talab that was built there. The one on the right, I just want to show how buffaloes, when they would first take their livestock and go to other regions where there's water, and buffaloes and other animals they want to wallow in water, especially in the hot summer of 45 degrees. So this water is now available in the villages itself. On the bottom left is a revived Sherni River. And on the bottom right is the revived forest where the different kind of trees are. And dhok is a very suitable tree for the Aravallis because it's completely suited for this kind of climate and geology. And it also provides excellent fodder for the animals. And it just dries up in summer, the tree. The leaves dry up, the animals eat the dried leaves, and one rainfall and it's green again. So there's been a revival of the whole gene pool and the biodiversity in the region. The next slide. So this is just another example. You will see the top left, there is another pond there that has led to what we say, when water is available, when the rain is captured and allowed to infiltrate into the groundwater aquifers, then the water levels in the bores and the dug wells also rises and water becomes available. That's the picture of a dug well from there. And it also leads to peace and happiness, which is what I want to show on the right. Because if we're talking about aspirations and we're talking about peace and security, and living in a society where conflicts are minimal and cooperation is more and generosity is there, I think then water is very key to all this. If we go to the next slide. So just want to say that if you capture the rain, it provides dignity, livelihood, and happiness. The rivers become alive and resilience is possible. So if you see this smiling man, you can guess what he would have done before there was water available. This was a structure made on his own land. And when we went to visit him in the first week of July, so they had built a small hut near this water conservation structure. They live somewhere else, but they have worked on their fields, which are banjar before. They want to look after their fields. And when we went there, they came running, and he said, he said that, because it's water that we are here, because it's water that you are here, otherwise where you and I would have a chance to meet. So when we talk about happiness index, I think we need to realize that actually what is it that we're talking of, and how these structures and this conservation of water enables us to have peace and security and a life of dignity. The next slide. So the last two slides are just focused on some of the learning. So the first point to realize is that water is critical for mitigation of climate change and adaptation. And this is why I say mitigation is because I'll just say in one line, is because some of the work that is done in Tarun Bharat Sangh in Alwar is more than 30 years old now. That has helped in groundwater recharge. It has helped in bringing in more rains, and it has helped in also reducing the temperature. So that's why we say it's important for mitigation. And adaptation is because if you have water and you have these water harvesting structures, then you can reduce the intensity of the disasters. And in fact, in one place where we went and we spoke to the villagers there, so they said with this, with this one monsoon and this water structure we have, we have resilience for 1 year. So if next year there is no rainfall, even then we will have enough water for our agriculture activities. And the next point is important to learn is that when the rain falls, we must make it, so when the water runs, the rainwater runs, it should be taught how to walk. Once it's taught how to walk, it should be, systems should be in place so that it enters into the groundwater aquifers. So we must slow the flow of rainwater, and in the other side, we must allow rivers to flow. So if we slow the flow of rainwater, it kind of prevents erosion, it prevents flash floods, it enables recharge, it enables soil moisture. And if the rivers flow, then the ecosystem is healthy. And if every farm can have a pond, then this also helps in keeping the soil moist. It also helps in deal with floods and droughts. And the relationship between groundwater and surface water must be maintained. And if we do the above, if we slow the flow of rainwater and if we allow rivers to flow, then the surface groundwater and surface water relationship will be maintained. Of course, here we also need to look at how we are going to use the water that is available. And ecoregion specificity is important because whatever water harvesting structures that you make, whatever rainwater conservation structures that you make, must be dependent on the local topography. So that's why it's very important to understand the local conditions. The next slide. Community participation is key for this because if you don't have this, then we all know that there's enough evidence that then the asset that you create is not looked after. In fact, in one of the villages where they're in Karoli, where the agricultural production has increased by at least 50%, and this the people say themselves, they say abhi aanand hi aanand hai. He says मुझे अपना गांव छोड़ने जाने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. अब मेरा गेहूं के लिए मुझे buyers फोन करते हैं और मेरे गांव में आके they come and pick up. So I don't have to hunt for a buyer and I don't have to even go out of my village. Why should I go out of my village? And he also informed that because now they have seen the benefit of the water conservation structure, which interestingly also helped recharge the borewells that had run dry. So the farmers had spent a lot of money in constructing these borewells, but they had all become dry. So now those are also recharged. So how to, and they now also are willing to spend up to 100,000 rupees for operation and maintenance of the water conservation structure because they know it's in their own interest. And also when they have their own water and when they are at peace and when there is no tension in their lives, they're also generous with sharing this water too with others. So if they feel downstream there's less water, they will open the gates. They used to work as labor. Now they provide labor to villagers from outside. They also get in labor because they had land which they were not cultivating because there was no water. So now they have got labor from outside to work and kind of prepare the boundaries of their field. So there's so many ripple effects that are happening because they have taken this initiative to conserve water. And in the end, government and people need to work together. And I think Maharashtra is a very good example of how this was possible. Rajasthan also, there are examples where they have worked with the government and with the forest department and constructed water conservation structures in forest areas. And in fact, in Maharashtra and the Agrani, they have even designated an official as the Agrani River officer. So he is the one who brings all the different departments together when there's any decision or any challenge that is coming in front of the Agrani River. And if we talk of resilience, peace and security and the happiness index, I think water is that one key that can unlock all these hard to get aspirations that we all have. I'll stop now, and there are many human interest stories, but I don't think there's time. And if there are any questions, I see there are two here. If somebody can just read them out, then I will attempt to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your enlightening presentation. I hope we have been able to learn a lot from your lecture. Now there are a few questions in the Q&A box. Actually, there's one question from Dr. Komal. The question is how to create awareness and educate students and local people to save rainwater.
Okay, so there are a lot of, thank you, Komal, for that question. It's extremely important because the younger generation, somehow in the last few years, there's been a disconnect with society and their water resources. And there is a need for youth to get involved in water conservation. And also, it's their common future and the future of subsequent generations, which are at stake now. So while my generation has made several mistakes and we're trying to rectify, do our best what we can, it's the youth also need to come forward. There are several, so when I speak about the Himalayan River Basin Council, this is a network of individuals from 23 states of India. And similarly, we have one in the Peninsular River Basin Council. So our mandate is one of our main mandate is to spread water literacy and also involve youth. And for this, we've also launched a Yuva Jal Biradari, a national Yuva Jal Biradari, which is under the mentorship of Rajendra Singh, where we are trying to get our youth connected to basically to water and to rainwater conservation. And we are also approaching various universities where we go and have sessions with the students. In fact, if Anamika is here, we are going to Guwahati on 11th, 12th, and 13th of this month, where we will be having meetings with in Cotton University in this and with 2 schools there. So wherever there is an interest from the children and from the college, we want to go there and share our experience and how we can involve them. We're also trying to look at actually what the course material should be, especially in colleges and universities. Because what is taught is mostly about how to extract from nature. What we need to teach now is how to give back and how to rejuvenate nature. So these are some of the things that we are doing. And if Komal would be interested, she can directly get in touch with me and I can explain more. I'd be happy to.
Ma'am, another question is by Manish Kumarji. The question is, what is the quality of the stored rainwater?
Okay, so the quality, it depends for what purpose you want to use this, this rainwater, right? Even in Western countries, even in India, and even in Bangladesh, for example, where there's so much of arsenic in the groundwater, they are looking at capturing rainwater and using that for drinking purposes. That is the easiest solution. So if you want to use it for, there are various very simple measures that you can take. If you want to use it for, say, drinking, then you let the first flush, you don't capture the first few drops that fall. You keep your rooftop clean. You can chlorinate your water tank, or you can have a small filtration system, which is made of sand and charcoal, and that can be used for keeping the water clean. Also, if you want to do recharge into groundwater, again, then you have a very simple filtration system comprising of different grades of stones and sand, and then allow the water to go through. So the silt and the other things can be taken care of. Also, you should not directly put water into the groundwater aquifer. If you leave a gap between the two, then the earth itself, the soil itself has very good filtration and cleaning systems. So that also takes care of some of the pollutants. And of course, prevention is better than cure. Try to minimize pollution into your water bodies.
Shailendra ji is asking, what are the prospects of rainwater conservation for urban area and industry?
Okay, so I will take the urban areas. There is a lot of prospect in urban areas, and in fact, several cities have got guidelines, and where it's mandatory before you get your drawings approved. If you're constructing a house, for example, you have to have a rainwater harvesting system in place. Unfortunately, we people find ways of circumventing that. And second, once it's constructed, we don't even do an operation and maintenance. That means regular cleaning up. So that we need to take care of. There are so many parks where we can have these rainwater harvesting pits that can be done. The various measures in which rooftop rainwater harvesting, within colonies, within large government institutions, also there are systems where rainwater harvesting can be done and used for different purposes. In industry also, several industries are now going to be zero discharge, and there are lots of examples where the Tata Group, I shouldn't be taking names, there are certain groups which are actually reduce their water footprint. They're reducing in their whole production cycle. They're seeing where the water can be used, can be minimized. They're seeing where the water can be recycled. So there are positive examples. And if you go to the FICCI website, there are certain documentation also about what different industries have done. FICCI at one time used to give awards to different industries on their water management.
Prakash ji is asking, we have traditional wisdom for rainwater harvesting, and we need to revive wells even in cities such as Mumbai. How could the community participation be increased in the urban areas?
So that's where this whole thing of water literacy becomes very important. You have to see it's about connecting. Our tagline in the council is connecting hearts, minds, and action of people with rivers. So you have to have that connect with the heart also. So for that, water literacy is important. To understand that water is not, first of all, yes, if 60% of your body is water, and if your water is not good, just imagine what you're doing to your body. So that's one. But when you talk about peace, security, de-stressing, travel, you want to go near a water body. So that connect with spirituality, with your culture needs to be revived. And for this, what we do, and even in Mumbai, we are doing in other cities also, we do a water walk, a river walk. So you go along the river, you just understand the river. So those kind of things, if you build the awareness and you also involve youth and different clubs, then I think there is a chance that the wells can be revived. And in fact, what he said about revival of well is something which is which I missed in my discussion. That's incredibly important, especially even in states like Jharkhand. With a whole lot of wells, they also help it in recharging give more space and more time for recharging the groundwater. And in fact, in the talabs and all, and in the rivers that we are rejuvenating, there also we are constructing some wells so that the water has more space to recharge. I totally agree.
Kundanji is asking, is there any cheap way to remove iron from overhead water tank?
So there are, I know when we were in Guwahati, we had very high iron in our water supply. So there was a aeration filtration system that we had used. So this is many years ago. I don't know about the cost now, and at an individual level, I'm not very sure. But I can, if I have his contact details, I can just check this and get back to him. But the aeration system was pretty inexpensive.
Vandana ji is asking, in water-rich areas, how water recharging can be improved in urban areas, especially in water-saturated zones?
Yeah, so this is a problem that we are also understanding when we are going to go to Guwahati, because there the problems are different. There's too much of rain. But like if you take the example of Guwahati itself, or you take the example of Silchar, in Guwahati there is a Deepar Bheel, the size of which has been, it's a Ramsar wetland, and the size of that wetland was reduced, I think almost tenfold. So here you had this nature's gift where you could absorb this rainwater, but you are kind of encroaching upon it, and that function is not taking place. So a different kind of system is required for areas which are water rich, and I think in urban areas like in where the rainfall is heavy and intense, it's important to look at the drainage pattern and to see we don't concretize, we don't encroach on the surface water bodies, we don't overly concretize. I mean, we do need some amount of concretization. We see that there's afforestation, and we see that appropriate drainage systems are developed. Of course, it may not be possible to have 100% solution, but at least you can reduce the intensity of the problem. Because increasingly with lesser rainfall, more urban flooding is taking place.
Oliver G is asking regarding river engineering structures for conservation of water. Is there an ideal sequence or series of structures that help best or help better in water management?
So I would not like to call it, engineering kind of immediately puts the idea of big dams. These are actually small structures, and like I mentioned, that it has to be topography and local ecology specific. So what may work in a particular ecology may not work in another place, and within a few kilometers apart only. For example, if I speak about the Agrani River Basin, in some places they made a check dam on the surface. So you could see the check dam which I showed in the photo. In another village, they made a subsurface, what they call as a Bhumigat Bhandara, because there was a 15-inch layer of sand. So they had to excavate that sand and then make this thing underground so that water could be held back. So looking at the local geology and the topography and the rainfall is extremely important before you take a decision as to what is the series, whether you want a series of check dams, at what distance the check dams should be, or do you want another kind of structure? So those things are dependent on the local topography. So one has to understand that, and for that, the participation of the community, the local wisdom that they have, the experience that they have, they'll be able to tell you, यहाँ पे चिकनी मिट्टी है, यहाँ पे रेत है, पानी इस तरह बहता है, पानी उस तरफ बहता है. But then based on all of that, then you can get an idea what is best suited for that place.
Abhijit G is asking, is there any sponsorship or monetary help given by Government of India to household for water conservation methods?
So earlier there used to be, at least for Delhi, earlier there used to be, there was a taxation, you would get a waiver for certain taxation if you were building rainwater harvesting structures. As of now, I'm not sure what the Jal Shakti Ministry is doing, because it's urban and rural are different areas. I'm not very sure, but a lot of their campaign is built on kind of awareness raising and getting people to do water conservation structures. But I don't think, at least to my knowledge, there is no financial incentive for this.
Ma'am, we come and end to the Q&A round, but we have one attendee who wants to ask question. Prabha Ji, can you hear me? You can unmute yourself and ask question to ma'am. Prabha Ji? Okay, ma'am, I don't think she can hear me right now. So with this, we come and end to the first expert session.
Concluding remarks by Indra ma'am. Ma'am, if you want to conclude with some remarks. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity, and it's good to see so many people are interested in this issue. And I think that we all need to get involved in seeing how we can actually adapt to climate change. And it also, I mean, what is it that we can do at an individual level? And what is it that we need to do at a collective level? Because right now the situation is such that it's basically all hands on deck. I just like to offer once again that I only gave examples of 2 states. I didn't speak so much about what the council is doing and what the other members of our Jal Biradari community are doing. But we have a network across almost all the states, and if there is a certain interest, if you want, for either holding water literacy or trying to address certain challenges, or you want to revive water harvesting rivers, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'll request Arjun if you can type the email, or unless people already have the email ID. But I really like to thank INPRI for this, and going forward, I hope INPRI plays a stronger, even more stronger role. I'm greedy. I have great expectations from you in taking this forward, and I'd really like to thank NIDM because they're doing a whole lot of discussions on this climate change issue in different parts of India, and God willing, we are going to do one with them on river rejuvenation and climate change in Lucknow in sometime in October.
Thank you, Dr. Khurana, for your presentation and all the questions that you have answered. Thank you once again, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now, moving on to the next session of our first day training program. Professor Anamika Barua is with us. Ma'am, are you there? Can you hear me?
Hear you, and you all hear.
Ma'am?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, ma'am, I can hear you. So I'll just give a brief introduction and then you can take over the session.
Sure.
Our second distinguished expert for the session is Professor Anamika Barua. Professor Barua is the professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, or IIT Guwahati. We'd like to welcome you, ma'am, and please take over the session.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hello, ma'am.
I was actually about to tell you that it is raining very heavily in Assam and the internet connection is extremely poor. So I am just using my mobile network right now to make sure that I can be heard. So I probably may not be able to use my video because if I do that, it takes away a lot of data and
Yes.
doesn't allow me to speak well. So will that be okay?
Sure, ma'am. Yeah, that will work.
You can hear me now, right?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Just give me 1 minute. Just 1 minute.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, so let me just quickly share the screen and thank you so much. I'm really sorry for putting you in a situation. It has been really, really difficult situation because me, right? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we could barely hear you back then. Maybe you can try once again.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you just give me 2 minutes? Let me see if I can try changing this connection to another
No,
one. because
ma'am, now it's working. So we can
but
hear
it
you.
will go off probably again. I mean, you have to keep me informed about it because it's just not letting me use it, because the problem is that the mobile data doesn't really work very well here. So that's also
Okay.
another problem, the place we are situated. Can you see my slides?
Yes, ma'am, we can see the slides and now we can hear you as well.
Okay, fine. So let me just quickly go ahead. So first of all, thanks so much to Indira for already setting the context. Let me first confess that I'm not a person who has worked extensively on a particular conservation strategy, such as rainwater harvesting. So I am not going to really focus extensively on rainwater harvesting, but what I felt is very important for everybody who works in this area to understand and to know is, what kind of provisions do we have, or how the water policy itself, which of course also includes several water use efficiency, water conservation, suggestions, how the water policy itself has evolved in the last so many years. And one of the most important thing that I realize is that, and I'm sure you would all agree with me, some of this thing that we are trying to bring back, the state from where I come, Assam, we always had traditionally a system of harvesting rainwater, but we have done away with it. And now we have more structured and more engineered approach to remove water scarcity. So if you really look at where we are now moving, is we are trying to bring back all that which we have lost, and trying to bring it back with science to make sure that again we are able to have more water, or can conserve more water. Now, what I want to discuss is that we all know the present situation we are in, the climate change era we are in, and we have already heard the recent IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, in 2022, it very clearly mentioned that, the climate change is happening and it is going to get worse. So there is no escape to it. The best thing to do is to identify ways to adapt to it and also to mitigate. Now, given that circumstances, let me first, start by a slide where I think it is very important for us to understand what do we really mean by a policy, exactly what a policy brings to our mind. So, if you really look at literature, a policy can be anything. It could be a law, it could be a regulation, it could be procedure, it could be an administrative action. It could also be a kind of a voluntary practice by the government or other institution. But the idea behind a policy is always to resolve a concern. For example, when you talk about a water policy, we are basically talking about resolving the concerns around the water. And it basically provides us a direction and also a directive to solve the concern that is in our hand today as well as in the future. So in a nutshell, if you really think what a policy is, it basically is something which is like a guideline for us, which provides us a direction to move now and also in the future. However, if you try to understand what are the characteristics of a policy, again, there are many work that has been done. And I have also given the reference. You can use this reference to read more on this. If you really want to understand what is a characteristic of a policy is a good policy if it is scalable. What do you mean by scalable? It means it can be on a temporal basis, it can move from this year to another year to next year, and also in terms of level, in terms of spatial level as well. So it is very important whether the policy can be scaled up, which is what we always talk about. Second is how much it reflects upon various other interconnected goals, interconnected sectors. Is it a standalone, or it also connects to other sectors? How adaptive it is, evolving with time. Like I heard Indira speaking about, the participation is so important. An approach where you involve community whenever you are designing a policy is so important. But it was not the case probably in 1950s, but now we do understand the role of community. So is your policy evolving with time, the needs, the science, the way it is evolving? And similarly, whether your institutions are flexible enough to include these changing roles of planning and implementation. So these four characteristics are extremely important when you talk about a policy. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that today, when we are talking about rainwater harvesting or any other water conservation technique, what we don't really see is that we really don't have a very clear-cut understanding how to do it. You may have bylaws, but is it really getting implemented? Why there are so many challenges? I think that's the question that we need to think of. Now, let me very quickly take you to the background of why today we are in a situation where we are. Why today we are having this webinar and discussing about how do we reduce this water stress? Was India always a country like this where we had to think about water so much? It actually not. So if you really look at what happened in India between 1950s to 1980s, you would see that there were several challenges that came, particularly the whole concern of food security. So India wanted to be self-sufficient because it also had a growing population, and it faced a devastating situation during the Bengal famine. And definitely the country did not want to come across a similar situation, did not want to depend on external agency to help them during this kind of situation. So becoming self-sufficient, particularly in food productivity or food production, was a very important strategy of the government. And on top of it, we also realized that the water resources are very unevenly distributed. And so, you can't really have everything done in one section area of the country. You have to also understand the availability, particularly seasonal availability of water. So the question was, how do you capture this water? So this was an era of infrastructure development. I'm sure you all know about it, that we focused a lot on large scale water infrastructure. What happened during this time? One of the most important thing that happened is we did away with our traditional water conservation systems that were in place, the small, and very indigenous way of managing water, because it was all replaced by a very technocratic engineering and centralized approach, So that's where we stopped involving community, and this whole participatory mechanism or community managed system kind of started to disappear. So the whole idea was large investments and large scale water infrastructure, of course, with the best intention, with the feeling that if you have these infrastructure in place, you will be able to conserve, store water more, conserve water better, and can be made available during the time of when you really need water. And so you had several institutions coming up. One of the most important institutions, that is what we have today as well, the Central Water Commission in 1945. It was also established, which was a technical body of the center for implementing most of these planning that was going on during the time between 1960s to 70s. And the next thing that came in, as you all know, was Green Revolution. And why do we now refer back to Green Revolution so much? As an economist, what I can say is that we mostly focus on land, labor, and capital whenever we are making an investment. But what we kind of forget is water as also an input to everything. So if you look at Green Revolution, of course, we became, we moved from a food deficit country to a world's leading agriculture nation. We had introduced high, yielding varieties of seeds. Unfortunately, they were extremely water intense. But at the time, we were living in an era when we have enough water. And so we could afford to do it. And particularly certain states such as Punjab, Haryana, and western parts of Uttar Pradesh, you would see that there had a huge influence of Green Revolution, which you obviously do not see so much in the northeastern part. So what basically happened due to Green Revolution in 1960s is that both land and water, which became very important, for interventions to yield results. So you need to make sure that there is enough water, and you need to utilize your land. Traditional methods of water management went out of fashion, and of course, large dams took its place. We also moved from multi-cropping to monocropping. And again, interesting, we are again talking about coming back to multi-cropping, which we actually had done away with. And also water scarce areas became center for economic growth, interestingly, which basically led to regional disparity, and which you see very clearly today that, if you compare the northeast part of India, where you definitely have much more water, or even the eastern part of India, you don't really see that kind of development compared to what you see in the north and the western part of the country. So Green Revolution, because of the kind of intervention that was so focused on certain section of the country, led to also regional disparity, and of course, also the poverty issue that we see today. So there are disparities, there are inequalities within the country at a larger scale as well, and then at the macro level, if you look at it. So what were the challenges? The challenges was poorly governed water system. The most important problem was very command and control approach with very less participation from the state. It was more a top-down approach. Maintenance, operation, and management became a very big challenge because we did not really have enough money. And the whole idea was build, neglect, and rebuild was a kind of a philosophy we were kind of following, and because of which most of the systems which we had put up started to, did not give us the kind reason for which we were bringing them up. And of course, it led to the decline in the public irrigation and water quality services. It also led to social unrest and political pressure because people were not happy, the farmers were not happy, they had to pay a lot, particularly the marginal and small farmers, to get their lands irrigated. And so there was a kind of an unrest, which you really see is still there in most of the states. Even now, there's a lot of disparity in accessibility of both land and water across the country. And then to solve this entire issue, what we started to now focus on was the era of groundwater development. From surface, we moved to the groundwater. And I think you all know very well, I don't have to really speak about this, what has happened because of this, because we don't really have a good system in place, no regulation. So it was a temporary rescue, and it was like a transformational idea because the tube well came in. And so obviously it became easily accessible for farmers. So initially it looked excellent. And so there was a lot of individual tube wells and there was power subsidy given. So all of this basically at the end, what it led to was seemingly you had an inexhaustible resource, and as if it was waiting for us to be used and tapped and remove our barriers that we saw during the and after the Green Revolution. Now, what was the gap that you see here and why all of these happened is because there was a huge gap between water development and policy efforts. There was no real policy in place for 40 years between 1947 to 1987 till we first formulated our water policy. And this was all done given some individual or few political ideas that was there, which was basically creating these narratives. And that is how we were basically moving. It took quite some time for the country to feel and to realize that we actually need some kind of directive for now to manage our water and also in the future. And of course, few very important steps were taken. For example, in 1983, National Water Council, Resource Council was established, which was headed by the Prime Minister of that at the time. 1985, Ministry of Water Resources was taken out from Ministry of Irrigation and Power. So you have two different ministries then. In 1987, National Water Resource Council was established, because the entire idea was to come up with a national water policy, which would basically take into account all of these very important questions that we have raised. Now, if you look at the national water policy of 1987, what do you really see in it? Of course, a lot of priority was given to drinking water, given also some amount of importance to the environmental and equity concerns. The emphasis was also given on increasing, but there was still a lot of emphasis that the irrigation to increase food production should not fall. And if need be, we should also focus on interbasin transfer. So this was a new thing that was coming out after the surface water and the groundwater issues. We felt that probably bringing water from those areas where there's surplus river water will also sort our problem. We recognized in 2000, so this was 1987, and in 2002, I'm bringing them together because there's not much to discuss in these policies. What you really see is that one is that there was this whole discussion of water as an economic good came up in 2002. And it recognized, of course, the ecological and environmental aspects. It also spoke about integrated water resource management. But the biggest issue was whether we should, on one hand, we are talking about we need to take care of water, community, participation, ecology, environment. On the other hand, you also want to look at water as an engine of economic growth or water as an economic commodity. So there was a lot of debates and discussions around it. But what you really see is it did not explicitly recognize the concerns of groundwater and overexploitation, therefore continued. In spite of all this effort, in fact, what we saw is that there was a shortfall of food grain, and that was mainly because of water scarcity, which many of us probably never realized. I would also say that the farmers' suicide that we see in the last couple of decades is nothing but because of these environmental concerns more than economic concerns. Lack of positive response from states were not there because the states were not formulating their state water policies, and the concerns related to ecology, social justice, efficiency were just like a mere statement. There was no serious thought around it. And as Indira very clearly mentioned that, we are disconnected with the community. Our younger generation always has this feeling that water can be managed through infrastructure by taming them. I teach in an engineering institution, so you can very clearly understand from where is this coming. So this is one of the things why it is so important to reach out. And this is also what I agree with Indira, that you need to teach these kind of courses in these kind of institutions, which are more technocratic, so that you get a holistic understanding of water as a resource. And if I can just bring you this, you can see that there was hardly any change. In fact, the water situation deteriorated from 50s to 2011. And what we also say is that, unfortunately, this 2002 probably gave us an opportunity to relook at the mistakes we made, but we did not. And it is known to be, and in most of the literature, policy literature, it is usually referred that 2002 national water policy is actually an opportunity lost. If we would have seriously looked at these concerns, we would have been in a better position probably. Then came the 2012 national water policy, which is considered to be comparatively better than the last two policies. And the reason being, you do see a lot of discussions around public trust doctrine, common pool resources, also integrating traditional knowledge with science, bringing more integrated perspectives such as equity and social justice. We also brought in new concepts such as water footprints, water accounting, water use efficiency, many of these things, e-flow, for example, and of course, climate change found a new position in the water policy. So if you look at the 2012 water policy, it actually has everything in place. But again, like every time that we see, it still continues to be highly technocratic. It does not, still focuses on having more and more storage reservoir, not really very poor in stand. There was still a lack of clarity in terms of whether groundwater is a public resource or a private resource or a common good. It is still not clear. And there is a lot of emphasis on integrated water resource management. If you really ask me, also being somebody who has been trying to teach water for so many years, I can't really explain to you what is there, because it has everything, but we still can't implement it. And the intersectoral issues such as water, food, energy nexus was really not addressed, which also was a very big challenge. So let me just very quickly come back to those four very important points that I have raised, and why today we feel that we are in a situation where we really need to relook at the way these policies are framed. One of the things that you really see is that, unfortunately, we have very few states, even now, which has developed state water policies. Unless you have a clear state water policy, because water is a state subject in our country, you may not necessarily agree to what the national level policy is talking about. You need to definitely have state water policies. And that policy has to be participatory in approach, like the photograph that we saw of the farmer that Indira showed. How much of that person's concern is actually coming up? The policy document itself talks about multi-scales, but process is not very transparent. It does not really involve various local bodies such as panchayats and municipalities, etc. It also talks about that this policy needs to be adopted by the state, so it has kind of left it to the state to use this policy document. In terms of across time, what you have is, interestingly, it is short-term and long-term planning, both is necessary, but you don't really see the policy talking about that till when this policy is going to be effective and when do we need to have a new policy. Reflexivity, honestly speaking, if you really look at this diagram, and you ask yourself, are we really involving social justice, women and child department when we are formulating water policy? Are we really involving agriculture, farmers, welfare department, science and technology? We are not actually. So honestly, reflexivity is very, very lacking in our policy. And that's why when you try to implement it, there are a lot of challenges. And therefore, we are not able to actually mainstream water in any kind of policy making. Relevance to our international commitments, which is so important, particularly the SDG 6 goal and the interrelated goal. I don't know whether we have been able to really bring that in our water policy. Look at the Paris Agreement, where you talk about so important food security and energy security doesn't really get reflected. The transboundary basin management, we still have this written in our water policy that bilateralism is something that we will follow. So that is also another area. And gender is also something, seems to be very reluctant used in our water policies. Adaptive in nature, of course, this is so important, but what you see is that it needs to evolve with time, with new situation, new conditions. To some extent, yes, it has, but still we are very disciplined oriented and very difficult to make it a multidisciplinary approach. We need to really strengthen the science and policy interface. Policy making needs to get participatory. And the most important thing, which I always keep thinking, when is the next policy going to come? It's 2022, 10 years. There is no set timeline, and we don't even review what we achieved from our last policy and where we want to go from here. So these provisions are not there in our policy. And of course, institutional flexibility is extremely important. Only if you are doing this in a very, very closed manner, and if you do not really give space to the state and the local, then you are basically not being flexible with the new era and the new challenges that are coming up in this particular time period. And there has to be a lot of capacity building and interaction and a change in mindset that has to happen. I still feel that these are very much at a nascent stage. One thing that I can say is that as you all know, there was a new committee that was constituted to relook at the 2012 water policy. And Dr. Mihir Shah was the chairperson. I was a part of that committee. And what I felt when I was sitting in that committee is, one is that we definitely went through a very rigorous process of several consultation. Many stakeholders, where it basically did some 120 consultation. A lot of people were brought in of different, not just academicians or not just large institutions. We've also brought in farmers association, civil society organizations, tried to keep it multidisciplinary and intersectoral. We also had brought in a lot of gender. If this policy comes out, you would see that gender is not a section, gender is across, because farmers are no longer men, farmers are both men and women now. So, and we also felt that the policy, if approved, also has a futuristic stand, moving away from supply side more towards demand management. While rainwater harvesting, I strongly feel, has both the component. One, it enhances your supply, but it also tells you to conserve water. And so overall, I feel there is a ray of hope if this new policy comes into place, and maybe we can take it up from there. I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this enlightening lecture. And now we will open for the Q&A round. So there are like few questions enlisted in the Q&A box. I'll just read it out to you, ma'am.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sunita ji is asking, is it possible to join? Oh no, sorry. I'll just move on to the next question. Raghav ji is asking, most residential colonies in middle and lower class income families are not built very scientifically and are congested. What technical improvements can be done in such cases for rainwater harvesting?
Well, I think one is that this is not something that I can very, answer this question, as like I said, I'm not working on rainwater, but as an individual, and I also live in a place where there is so much of housing, just let me give you an example of the colonies which I see in Guwahati. Rightly say that they are very congested, but you still can make a possibility for rainwater harvesting. If there is a possibility to do something on your rooftop, it is possible. There can be pipes that can be attached, which can be, connected inside. You can use your rainwater. What I want to say is harvesting rainwater is not like a very technologically challenging thing. It's a very simple thing. For example, in Assam, we used to have houses with roofs, and there used to be something like this at the corner of the roof. So water is to get, and it would be like kind of a little slope, and the water gets accumulated there. We will put our buckets there, and the water gets collected there, one after another, a lot of water. We used to use those water for washing, for cleaning, and for many. And what we make sure is that we keep cleaning those channels. So, it is not like a rocket science. I keep saying this. Rainwater harvesting was there and can be revived until and unless we have that willingness and understanding that it is not a redundant science. It is a very important way of managing water.
Prakashji is asking, water scarcity directly impacts women as it has gender dimension. When there is a drought, The rural women have to walk many miles for water. This impacts their health, education, and other activities. Even small girls have to suffer as they have to take care of the sibling. How women can be given more policy space at the grassroots level?
Very good question. Actually, to be honest, there are changes happening. Let me tell you, frankly speaking, so this is also very gendered. If I can just spend 2 minutes on this. If you look at domestic water, and I'm sure if Indira is there would agree with me, is that if you really see domestic water, people do see a connect between women and domestic water, because women are considered to be provider of water in their households, and it is also a private space. Women works inside the house, and there is a need for women to provide water, etc. So particularly rural India. So you see that in most of the panchayat, etc., you are now trying to bring women. It's another matter whether those women are representing themselves or somebody else, but you do see in our policy document, there is an acknowledgement, water and women are intrinsically linked. But what worries me most is women are not seen at the national level and at the transboundary level, because somewhere at the national and transboundary level, you talk a lot about taming the water, you talk about interbasin transfer, you talk about flood control, disaster management. That seems to be very masculine. And it looks as if women has no role to play. But unfortunately, if there is no proper mechanism at the national level and at the transboundary level, particularly river basins, which are transboundary in nature, that at the end of the day, who suffers is the women who are taking care of your domestic needs. So what I feel is that there are two things. Women needs to be there at every level. So we should not keep only talking about women and domestic or women at local levels. It's high time that we should propose and say that women needs to be there from the point of planning to implementation, wherever it takes her to be there. So to answer your question, there's no one answer to it, but yes, of course, I agree. Policy space still has to be created. Very few women are there, particularly in Ministry of Water Resources. There's hardly any women, unfortunately.
Vandana ji is asking, is there any policy for ecological restoration of rivers and lakes in cities, as those have been converted to drainage carrying corridors?
Yeah, well, that I think you have answered already. We have already so many of like Ganga Action Plan. Now we also have a Brahmaputra Action Plan. But honestly speaking, somewhere again, poor involvement of community participation, everything is so important. Dialogues with, so you cannot really, everything cannot be forced. Capacity building, understanding, like what Indira mentioned, it takes time for things to change. You cannot now have any more a top-down approach. It is also in a way true that many local communities are also throwing garbage in the river. But why is it happening? We need to look at the root cause of it. Probably there is no other way to throw your garbage out. So there is a lack of understanding, lack of connectivity with other departments. So many factors comes into play, and it's not easy. I'm glad that NIDM and IMPRI is like bringing out these kind of technical sessions or discussions. These are very important. Today, I'm sure many of you are thinking about it. Today, many of you are getting some idea about where the challenges are, and this is what needs to continue, even if it takes more time.
Rachit Tiwari ji is asking, what are your views about amendments to the Water Act?
Yeah, it's too old. It needs to be amended. That's my only answer. Unfortunately, our water policy depends on an old act, which was in 1970s, and it definitely needs to be relooked. But there are a lot of political issues, and there's a lot of resources that has to be invested. But one thing that I want to say, that should not mean that our water policies cannot be progressive. You have your act, but you can still have because policies are not act. Policies are guiding principles and directives. You can always have a very progressive water policy, which is where now probably we are focusing, as we are not able to shake our act. But yes, our act definitely needs to be relooked.
Vinod ji is asking, nowadays lakes, water pools and riverbeds are occupied illegally, which creates threat for water scarcity in nearby areas. Kindly throw some light on this context.
I don't know what light to be thrown. We all know that there is a huge informal water market. That is again because we have water scarcity. And particularly, unfortunately, if you look at the peri-urban areas, which are very close to the urban areas, the urban residents are actually getting water from those peri-urban areas. Now, you provided, the municipality provides or gives you the permission to construct a house because that's their only mandate. They are not bothered from where the water is going to come. So there is, like, this is where the reflexivity comes in. You know, you are not connecting that when you build a multi-complex, it needs water, it needs energy, it needs roads, it needs everything. It is not just the land. So when you don't have these connects, what you are now doing is you are taking away the resources of the farmers, giving them some amount of money, and then these have become, these common pools have become private property, and you are using that water, supplying it to urban centers. So there's always already a rural-urban, peri-urban conflict. So that's the situation. I mean, the informal market, of course, is there. Just one thing, again, having an informal market or maybe a parallel market is not an issue if we are not able to manage water scarcity. The issue is the parallel or the informal market remains unregulated. That's very important. We need to make sure that our parallel it in a way as if it is supporting the government when it is not able to reach out to the public. That's something that I would suggest.
Vinodji is asking whether we have any policy to prevent seawater entering and contaminating the potable water sources, especially bore wells and wells situated near to coastal areas.
Sorry, I won't be able to answer this question. I haven't worked on this area at all. Probably there is, but I am not aware of it. Not in the water policy, of course.
Vandana ji is asking, is there any policy framework for urban riverfront development?
There is, as far as I understand, there is, of course, this understanding that we now need to develop our riverfront, like the way it's been done in other countries, including China and all. For example, my own city has a big Brahmaputra river and we need to develop, and these developments are happening. But there's no policy or a directive to how to do it. It's absolutely at the state level. And moreover, this is not just related to water. That's what I want to tell you. This is about the land, about many other departments, about the PWD department. So water policy cannot alone reflect on this. Developing the riverfront is not it's basically this whole idea of room for the river helps actually. If you develop in the sense that you keep some space and you don't let houses coming in just close to the river, the idea has actually come from that concept that you must leave some room for the river to flow. But that doesn't mean that you do your development in a way that you change the course of the river. So that's where your water policy comes in, but not really, as far as I know, that we have seriously given a thought. It's a very new concept. Of course, we did try to bring it in the new water policy, but not like a framework.
Prakash is asking, sugarcane is extremely water intensive, but there are many political aspects to water management. In districts of Maharashtra, water scarce district do have many sugar factories. What water harvesting provisions can be made mandatory to such scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, a very big question, that why are we growing water scarce crops in water scarce region? But you know, water and land are very closely linked. So I can't really make a sweeping statement here saying that Maharashtra should not produce any more sugarcane and all that sugarcane should be produced in the northeast or eastern belt where we have more water. That's not possible, because even for that, you need energy, you need land, you need a lot of resources, and the land holding sizes itself in the northeast is not so high. So, you know, these are very, very complex problems. Yes, of course, rainwater harvesting can solve certain amount of problem, but let me tell you, the bigger problem is water use efficiency. We waste a lot of water even while irrigating our land, and that, if you can reduce, usually the amount of water a sugarcane should drink when you are producing it, which is, we call it as a water footprint, is much higher in India. Why are we not able to reduce that water footprint? Do we at all bother about it? Do we at all do any kind of water accounting? I think this is something where we need to, relook and think. While rainwater harvesting is important, but along with that, what are other water conservation and water use efficiency we are implementing?
Vinodji is asking, due to climate change, it is leading to water scarcity and drought. So what are the immediate action that needs to be taken by the government and common man?
Yeah, I mean, save water, conserve water. Common man has to conserve water. Like the way unfortunately, water seems to be still a free product. And that's where the debate comes in, like whether we should pay for water or we should not. Because the moment you start, like you pay for electricity and you make sure to tell your children that I will always tell my kids that, switch off the fan, switch off the light. Probably we are not strict about water because many a times we are not paying for it. But that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we will pay a very high price. So I think it's a responsibility of every individual. We should not just say that government is not doing rainwater harvesting. Everybody can do. Let me tell you, you just take out your bucket when it is raining very heavily. You will save 1 bucket of water by not utilizing your tap water. So I think every man or every woman has an opportunity to reduce the use of water. The more and more we reduce, lesser and lesser water will be pumped either from the ground or from the surface, and we are saving water.
Shailendra ji is asking, is there any possibility to work in collaboration with IIT Guwahati, as Shailendra ji has worked in various projects, and he is commenting on the uniformly distribution of river water, which may help to control flood in areas of Assam and Northeast region.
Okay, Shailendra ji, you can send a mail to me. Maybe that is a better way to discuss on this.
With this, we come an end to the Q&A round, ma'am. So I would like to thank you once again for this deliberation, taking up any discussion. And if you want to add some word for a way forward.
Well, thank you very much for having me here, and sorry for the technical glitch, but I think these kind of programs needs to happen. And so when I was asked to speak, I told, I think I told Simi that, I'm not really a rainwater harvesting person because I work more from a larger policy perspective, but I did not say no to come to this platform because I thought whatever information or knowledge we have gathered, it's important to disseminate. And these are the platform where you can disseminate and also to learn, because I definitely learned a lot what Indira presented. So we can also learn from, each other. So yeah, so good luck with your initiative and hope you will continue this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now moving on to our last session of our first day training program, I would like to invite Dr. Jenia Mukherjee. Dr. Mukherjee, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, welcome, ma'am. I will just give a brief introduction and you can start your presentation after that. Dr. Mukherjee is Assistant Professor at Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Kharagpur. We welcome you, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Sauravi, and thank you, IMPRI, as always, because this platform has been extremely active in my life since the last like 2 years or so. And during the lockdown period also, I found IMPRI to be very, very active. And when we were a bit morally taken aback, but I think like through these programs and training programs and talks and sessions and lectures and presentations, IMPRI was that platform which kept on harping on socio-ecological issues, cutting across several aspects and domains such as the urban, rural, peri-urban, gender dimensions and whatnot. So first and foremost, I would like to confess that rainwater harvesting is not my specialization. I have never by myself, particularly worked on any project where I have kind of studied and explored rainwater harvesting. But I have two connection, how do I say that? I am connected to this particular theme or this very relevant and timely topic in two ways. So I'll first explain this, and I think I'll share some slides. They're very rudimentary, basic and fundamental slides. And through those slides, I'll be trying to also discuss, my larger position to this particular theme and what are my perspectives and insights on this. Because this particular theme or topic of implementing rainwater conservation. So the whole idea is to implement it. So this has to be done on an action research mode. So the theoretical discourses also remain very important, but at the same time, there is a very strong axiological component to this. So this cannot be only epistemological, where things should be knowledge induced, knowledge based, but at the same time, most importantly, implementation is the keyword. So what would be the implementation strategy? What could be the strategies, mechanisms, dynamics through which rainwater harvesting or rainwater conservation can reach the maximum success rate when we are targeting particular communities, when we are targeting particular areas, when you are targeting particular socio-ecological zones. So when we are discussing the potential of actions, the potential of implementation, the potential of formulation of strategies, I think it is very important that axiology also needs to be induced by knowledge at the same time. So it means that we have to have very detailed, nuanced, sophisticated understandings, explorations, and analysis of situational context that I think to a great extent will enable us to understand which kind of design principles we can fall back upon. So I would present some information from a very small scale case study from the island topography of Bengal, which is the Sundarbans. And I will not go into the very detailed quantitative data sets, but I will be basically, this presentation will be providing some teasers, which could be enablers for us to plunge deeper into some of the theoretical discourses, some of the theoretical understanding that I think are important, that are imperative when we are discussing and when we are really, we are sincere about implementation of rainwater conservation across, many parts, through the length and breadth of the country, which is definitely encountering water scarcity from multiple dimensions. So with this, I'll just try to share the slides. Yeah, I think it's visible, right?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay. Yes. So if you can take a look into the title of this presentation, this is like rethinking adaptation and social resilience, lessons from a rainwater harvesting project in the Indian Sundarbans. So all these keywords are very, very important, like adaptation, social resilience, and you will see that in literature, in scholarship, there's a lot of discussions are going on so far as resilience is concerned. And this is also a shift from sustainability research to resilience research. They are, and of course, they are connected. But what we find very recently is also the formulation and lot of discussions and brainstorming on this particular concept of what is also known as social resilience. So I'll be explaining, I'll be coming to that. And also what do we really mean? What do we understand? How do we perceive? How should we perceive adaptation? So, and are these kind of expansive concepts? So what kind of insights can we draw from this particular case study that I'll be focusing on so far as the Indian Sundarbans Delta is concerned? Now, this is the particular area. So this is the Sundarbans Delta, and one major decision which has just been taken 2 days back is that now Sundarbans is also a separate district. So now the number of districts have increased for the state of Bengal, and Sundarbans, Sundarbans has been assigned with the district status now. So which is, I mean, there are pros and cons, but yes, this is a separate district now. Previously, it used to, so 19 blocks are inhabited by people. So it's an entire, it's an island archipelago. So this is very remote. This is located in the southernmost tip of Bengal, and this is just above the Bay of Bengal, and also it will be a bit. It is a bit problematic if we consider the Indian Sundarbans entirely as a homogeneous block. No, it is not, because in terms of geographical perspectives, in terms of politics, in terms of socio-economic and demographic patterns, different blocks also kind of demonstrate different attributes. And it is very important to understand the specific attributes so far as different blocks, like for example, Canning or Mathurapur or Sandeshkhali are concerned, and to understand the multiple risks and ecological threats and hazards this particular island archipelago encountered with. So the particular example that I would like you to focus on today is the rainwater harvesting project, which was implemented by an international NGO in collaboration with some of the local NGOs working in that particular region. So this was like an LWSI, Lutheran Worldwide Trust, also played a very important role in scaling up, in formulating and also scaling up this project of rainwater harvesting. And this is just a brief profile of this of these two blocks in the Indian Sundarbans, Mathurapur 1 and 2. So it's very fundamental basic details on area, size, number of villages, total population, etc., which has been collected from the Department of Sundarban Affairs. Now this department will also gain a lot of weightage because Sundarbans has been assigned with this new district status. Now, one again key concept that I would like to shed light on is the concept of riskscapes. So what is this riskscapes all about? So if I break it down, it can be landscape of risks. So this is a conceptualization which has been put forward by the social scientist, German social scientist Müller-Mann, who work on disaster studies a lot, and also political ecology of risks. So Müller-Mann and Everts, they came up with this concept of riskscapes, by which they mean, risks are material, but at the same time, risks are also, kind of manufactured so far as the particular geographical territory is concerned. And most importantly, it is also the capacity and ability of the communities to deal with risks that shape the risks or the multiple risks that kind of imbricate a particular ecological zone. Now, this concept, I think it is it assumes a larger significance so far as this volatile and plural context of the Sundarbans is concerned, because if we really need to understand Sundarbans, we have to deploy the analytic of multiple risks or riskscapes to understand, the different kind of hazards that these island archipelago kind of encounters every day, and these are part of everyday life reality so far as the communities or kind of inhabiting these different islands are concerned. So there are cyclones, there are threats in terms of sea level rise, tiger attacks, poverty, inequity, marginalization, political corruption, and definitely exploitation by the statecraft in terms of access to ecosystem services. Whole lot of controversies in terms of access to the core areas which have been designated as the Sundarban Tiger Reserve area, or the Sundarban which fall under the Sundarban Bioreserve area and all. So multiple risks together that keep on shaping, shaping the socio-ecological template of this particular, ecosystem zone. Now, why am I discussing this? Because, for example, if we also now drill down a bit more into the Mathurapur blocks, then we find that, these areas, these blocks, like several other blocks also, they encounter manifold challenges, including access to water. So quantity, quality, and access to water in terms of, accomplishing drinking water needs and irrigation remain hugely problematic in these particular, in these particular blocks. So, since the 1980s, especially Mathurapur, we can see that how these blocks, in these blocks, experimentations are being conducted so far as rainwater harvesting is concerned, and through the excavation of ponds, and some NGOs, kind of gain some success in terms of implementation of this pond excavation programs. But the entire thing got scaled up to a great extent with the entry of LWSI into the scene, and they were heavily funded by an international NGO. So there was this international funding which also backed the project extensively. So this was community-based water resource management with rainwater harvesting as the pillar. So far as this particular project in these 2 blocks of Mathurapur was concerned. So this project went on for a period of roughly 10 years. But very interestingly is that this project was anchored in the mode of the private property region. So by this I mean that and this will get a bit clearer when I move into the next slide. So the idea is that this was community. So if you go through the project reports and if you also go through the evaluation and implementation reports, you will see that they mention community based. But at the same time, there is no concept of commons, because when the ponds, if you see what are the patches where the ponds have been excavated, you see that they are lands from private individual households. So because Mathurapur 1 and 2 blocks lack common property resource base. So there is a lack, there is an inadequacy of common property resource base in that region. And that is why, this whole project, was kind of anchored within the larger ambit of the private property. So this is a contradiction. This was a contradiction from day one. But as I mentioned that this project, so rainwater harvesting went on in these in the different blocks of Sundarbans, but especially in these 2 blocks, the project kind of got scaled up when 170 village communities of 7 gram panchayats across these 2 blocks. They in these villages under the 7 gram panchayats, the pond excavation and land shaping initiatives spread across, and the community started accruing benefits out of the project. So what happened between 2005 and 2011 is that 560 new ponds, so it's a good figure. So 560 new ponds were excavated, and 125 ponds which were lying in a bad shape were re-excavated. And so these are some very minute details about the project. And how is, of course, any kind of project, it's a kind of an assemblage of technological apparatus, social arrangements, and interplay of key ecological variables. So this project is also not an exception. So what we find here is that, interestingly, like I said, that Mathurapur 1 and 2, these 2 blocks lack common property resource base. But as the land shaping endeavor, it needed community efforts, because these kind of excavation work, it was not possible. The NGO did not want to provide a lot of money to the laborers, but it was a different kind of an arrangement altogether. So the whole idea was that the communities should get involved. So people in groups would get involved to kind of excavate these ponds and also desealed the existing ponds. So as I mentioned, that 125 ponds were also desealed and taken care of, and they were re-excavated. But this needed community endeavor and efforts. So, but the thing was that the land on which these ponds were excavated, these were lands of individual households. So what happened is that there was a mandate that if a particular pond needs to be excavated, then a self-help group had to be formed. So this was the typical mandate for this rainwater harvesting project, mainly conducted and implemented under LWSI. And the first idea was to kind of form this self-help group. So people 10 to 15 people should be part of this SHG. And then after the formation of the SHG, they will apply before the NGO. And expressing their interest to join this initiative. And then there will be verification and assessment of the application by the NGO to check feasibility. So feasibility in terms of the area of land, the functioning of the SHG, whether the people also have had the skill and the expertise to initiate the project and also sustain it for a particular period of time. So feasibility checks, rigorous feasibility checks were also definitely part of this design plan. And then priority-based selection of beneficiary based upon the fact. This is again very tricky. This is also important, on which I think I would like to draw your attention, that the selection, the selection criteria depended on some variables and some factors, which unfortunately generated injustices and inequity within that communities in the target villages. So this is also reality. Now, then once the beneficiaries were selected, then there was a joint agreement between the NGO, SHG and farmers regarding funding, then receipt of fund from the NGO and accumulation of the remaining fund by the, so this is again something important, 60 to 80% of the funds were provided by the NGO as loans, which had to be repaid by the SHG and the CBO, community-based organization, and the remaining they had to arrange through other alternative mechanisms. Then there was this commencement. Once all this fell in shape, then there was the commencement of pond excavation for rainwater harvesting, and then refund of loan received from NGO to the representative. So this was the mechanism, or this was the institutional arrangement through which this local project was implemented in the different villages of these two blocks. And you can see some pictures here. So this is a work which was done in 2010 or so, 10-11. So this is from the field. Now I will come to the second, or actually the last part of the discussion, which I think is more important. This is I have put it rethinking community in community-based water resource management, in this case rainwater harvesting. So the disclaimer is that, and I think in the IMPLI platform itself, I had talked about the bottlenecks or the limits that are there when we start eulogizing and romanticizing community. There are few buzzwords, there are few kind of terminologies and vocabularies which remain very important for funding agencies, because if those come, I'm being very frank and honest here. So if you mention those things in your project proposal, the probability of getting your getting the funds remain higher. So these are lucrative terms like sustainability, like resilience, like community. But what does community entail? What do we mean by community when we are discussing, community-based participatory resource governance, or community-based, water resource management, or community-based forestry, or community-based anything for that matter? So what is community in community-based management? And there is also a very strong and how do I say, rich literature now, which counters management and seeks for replacement of management with governance. And of course, there is a reason, but there is a strong rationale behind that. Another terminology which is also much in vogue these days is co-management. So no more, people rely on management, but they rely on co-management, which means that, it's not only management by one particular group of actors, but by sets of actors. So then it becomes co-management, and thus people, they believe, it's their conviction that co-management, the rate of success is higher because the participation of multiple stakeholders are drawn in the process. Now, so far as this particular case study is concerned, I think when my student, she was doing her MPhil, long back, a decade back, in these two blocks. So initially, how do we got interested in the project is that lot of, there was newspaper coverage, and the government, at that time it was just a new, so there was, the regime change was very immediate that time, 2010, 2011. So the left front government was immediately replaced by the Trinamool government in West Bengal, and there was much hue and cry about the success of rainwater harvesting projects in West Bengal, and in Bengali this was called Jol Dhoro Andolon. And banners and posters, kind of glorifying rainwater harvesting projects throughout the length and breadth of West Bengal, and also drought-prone areas like Purulia, deltaic regions like Sundarbans, which of course face multiple crises, water crises, access to water resources, etc. And so continuously we were being informed about and with the successes of this rainwater harvesting project. So we thought, just let us do a very small scale study on two particular blocks, because, the success story was also, how to say, like very good. It was very strong in these blocks. And Mathurapur otherwise is also a very vulnerable, remote and poverty-stricken block if you compare it with some other blocks of the Indian students. Now, so our idea was to just do a field work because the student was mainly from the economics background, so she could also apply some regression and quantitative techniques. But as I was her supervisor, so we were also using ethnography, and that is why we were using array of methods and methodology to really just to explore, just to understand like the different dynamics and dimensions and dialectics, which was kind of which was shaping the success or limits or failures of this rainwater harvesting project under this NGO in collaboration with CBOs and self-help groups. So the first thing that we found out, we could identify was that the selection criteria. So each individual villager or the farmers could only apply those farmers, those marginalized, of course, marginalized farmers, but those farmers could apply for whom the land holding was at least more than 0.33 acres and within 2.5 acres. But in the like when it was publicized, the whole idea was that they said that that those people, the communities who accrued benefits out of it, their land area should not be more than 2.5. Their land holding size should not be more than 2.5 area. But nobody mentioned that at least some amount of land, the farmer or the community or the SAG that applied for this project, they need to have some amount of some acres so far as land holding is concerned, and so it means that the most marginalized in those villages, they were somehow excluded from the project. Now, of course, there are technicalities and that influence this kind of a decision making, but of course, through this project, we saw that how desperation, anxieties, and inequities definitely were crafted in the village community, because it created a distinct, like a marked distinction between the beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries in the village. And also, like a few households, they were not, though they qualified, but they were not really interested to give their land area, because they were more interested to pursue alternative livelihoods activities. But and the idea was that digging a pond, excavation of a pond would actually lead to reduction in net cultivable area. Then there are several, these are very few, these are some basic limits that we're talking about again. But then there was failure to accumulate funds for pond excavation, because as you saw that that the NGO only provided a loan of like 60 to 80%, but the remaining, the rest needed to be arranged by the SHG itself. But sometimes, the SHGs, the CBOs could not arrange funds. So that also led to the rejection of application. And then inefficiency, different types of inefficiency. So we also followed case study approach, where we collected case narratives, and there are like thick descriptions of cases where and there are multiple stories which absolutely demonstrate how there were several challenges which were encountered by the villagers in terms of SHG formation, but also during the post-formation phase in terms of functioning of the SHG. Now, so I was initially talking about community. You see that these days in recent scholarship there is a critical literature that try to talk about. Sorry, there is a typo. So this should not be the next two circles will not be passive spectators. So it would be just a second. Yeah. Yes. So from passive spectators to coping actors to active managers or adaptive managers as well. There are multiple theories, of course, the big name, the stalwart who did a lot of research and whose work is famous, which also led her to get the Nobel Prize in 2009. Elinor Ostrom, she has done a lot of work on local governance and collective action. But apart from that, before that, I think M. Olson also reflected a lot on local governance and collective actions. And there are many people who also disagree with some of the notions of Olson and the Olsonian effect. But the whole idea is that the success of the project, of any project, should be evaluated by taking into consideration the active role or agential attributes of communities. So if you are saying that it's a community-based management, the community-based, for example, water resource management or forest resource management, so you are just trying to include the community in your like project design. Not even design, you are actually including the community in your project implementation. And then you think that, it is a community-based project. I think there should be a note of caution on this, because these communities have been involved from day one, from the time of the inception of the project, from the analysis phase. So there are different phases, like linear, which progresses in a linear fashion, which is also known as the ADDIE model, like for example, analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. These are the 5 basic stages. These are the 5 basic stages so far as the journey of any project is concerned. So what is important is that, like, whether the communities were involved, whether they also got a chance in the decision making on it. So if communities get a chance in decision making, in the technological choices that are actually forged, then to a great extent, the weightage on the community can actually be provided. But otherwise, the community just remain passive spectators on whom a project is implemented, the project is thrust upon, and then it kind of generates a lot of intended and unintended consequences and outcomes. And then the community need to again cope with this for many years. For maybe even for decades. But how can community become adaptive and active managers? By harnessing the benefits of the like sustained implications of particular project. That is something on which this community of socio-ecological researchers are really doing a lot of work and drawing lessons from different case studies from different parts of the world, especially the global south. So that's another big topic. So I'll not go into it right now. So coming to the final slide. So I just wanted to also discuss adaptation through responsibility. So a lot of discussions again going on resilience. So what is resilience? And also social resilience. So it is the governing capacity of the community, it is the adaptive capacity of the community. So what kind of capacities are we talking about when we are discussing, adaptation, or when we are perceiving communities as adaptive managers? There's an interesting coinage again by Donna Haraway. So Donna Haraway is an environmental humanities scholar, and who have, in different words. She has talked about responsibility, responsibility. So the ability to bounce back, not also always bouncing back, but also the ability to respond. So how are you responsive? So this is also a kind of a subjective framing, but this is very, very context specific, and this is place based. And when I'm saying place-based, it is not only the role of space or the geography that play an important role, but it is also the role of history or temporality that should be taken into consideration. So cultural factors, historical factors, political factors, of course, and spatial factors. All these factors, all these variables, so through the complex interplay of spatio-temporal cultural dynamics, the community keep on adapting to the changing environment, and it is not always adaptation, but it's also a kind of an array of practices that you can actually also define or also discuss as adjustments. So it's a wide spectrum, an array of practices with adjustments on one hand at the one extreme and adaptation on the other, and multiple other things through negotiations, bargains, continuous experiments, etc. So what happens is that in a particular space, in a particular place, against contextual vulnerabilities, resilience is gradually gained through steps and bounds across situated adaptive practices. So this situatedness, I think, is very, very important, and that is why we should not be talking about, or we should not be actually we should not even attempt to compile recommendations and prescriptions which we can then deploy in specific sites. It cannot work like that. So, and it is also important to understand the actors who are involved in a particular place, so far as a particular project is concerned, and it is important to identify the sets of actors and their role, the role that they play in the formulation and forging of these situated adaptive practices. So what I'm trying to say is that I think to a great extent this boundary between state and community, it has got blurred to a great extent, and it is important for us to really focus on the intersections between state and community. And then, the programs to a great extent can be inclusive. I think Anamika was talking about how we should not be absolutely falling back on the government, but we should also be, nurturing and harnessing local governance, the strengths of local governance strategies and practices. But yeah, so this is important, but at the same time, we also need to re-ontologize a bit what is state, what is community, what is the relationship between state and community. So these are the questions that we also need to ask, and we need to find out the answer so far as specific socio-ecological contexts are concerned. So I will be kind of paying a whole lot of weightage on these place-based, space-based narratives. So, and finally, I would like to emphasize on knowledge co-production, and of course, knowledge mobilization as another important step in this entire initiative. And whole lot of discussions going on so far as knowledge co-production is concerned, because again, when I started, I think I said that I mentioned that why this topic is very relevant, because we are discussing implementation, because we are discussing actions, we are discussing how we can come up with strategies through which implementation can be done in a successful and sustained manner, right? So if we really we are harping at sustainability, I think it is important for us to understand, to internalize what knowledge co-production is all about, and what are the different principles for knowledge co-production. And these principles for knowledge co-production also becomes very, very important so far as rainwater harvesting projects throughout the length and breadth of the country is concerned. So what are the principles of knowledge co-production? So this is not my own diagram, but or illustration, but I have drawn it from some literature, and people who are focusing now on knowledge co-production, they come from different walks of life, from natural sciences, social sciences. They are mainly interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary researchers. So people like Nostrom and Karine Weibon and all. And these are the four principles which I find to be very, very important. So one is context-based. So I think I had already discussed this a lot. So how do we need to, why do we need to situate the process in a particular, within a particular context, space, or an issue as well? Pluralistic, explicitly recognize the multiple ways of knowing and doing. So this also comes a lot from the political ecology, literature or political ecology understanding or explorations of processes, socio-ecological processes. So how, why, and how do we need to accommodate plural voices? So I think Ashish Kothari and Arturo Escobar, they also in their recent book, they talked about this pluriversal possibilities. So it's important really to accommodate and come up with pathways through which these pluriversal possibilities can be unfolded and asserted. Then it needs to be goal-oriented, clearly defined, shared, meaningful goals that are related to challenge at hand. There are specific, recommendations, specific sets of prescriptions for specific challenges. And finally, it really needs to be interactive. So this should be knowledge co-production, knowledge mobilization can only be done through series of multi-stakeholder engagement workshops, series of, through different innovative ways. And here, innovation plays really a very important role. Innovation in research. I'm not only saying technological innovation, but also a lot of innovation is needed in research as well, so far as research design principles are concerned. And this is something which we are doing now. I will not say proud, but I'm quite happy with this project that I'm doing for the first time, which is an action-oriented research, and it's more action than research actually. So this is the inland fishing experimentation in Kumail. I will not go into the details of this project now, but we have managed to draw funds from our overlapping projects which are going on in the Sundarbans Delta, which are part of the projects which have been funded by European Union and SSHRC, Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council Canada, and also this EQUIP project. And recently we were successful in getting funds from SwissNex, which is the embassy of Switzerland in India. And the best part is that you can see, so he is a bureaucrat and he's the principal scientist from CFRE. So we managed to take them to the field, and so knowledge production was done at different stages and through multi-modal methodological designs. So I'll not go into the details of it, but I would like to conclude on the ground that let us not draw conclusions and let us not plunge into sweeping generalization by doing a face value analysis of particular projects. They may sound very attractive, they may sound very romantic, but at the same time, it's very important for a group of researchers, for all of us, to really do a very detailed, not face value, but needed analysis of the nitty-gritties of particular projects, and to figure out and find out and map the entire scenario, do a very robust situational analysis and implement a scoping exercise through which we can really do a very good challenge of SWOT, like the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis, and not only SWOT, but a nuanced SWOT, how it can enable us to understand what are the different barriers that are there in these otherwise so-called participatory and community-based projects, and how can we really mobilize communities. We know the communities are already they are not the passive spectators by any chance, for sure, from the existing stage itself. So, and why there is a need to emphasize a lot on knowledge co-production and mobilization through multi-stakeholders engagements and arrangements, through which different small-scale, cost-effective local projects then can get translated into successful stories. So I think this model also does good a lot. So far as rainwater harvesting implementation of rainwater conservation is also concerned. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee, for a very interesting presentation and also very informative at the same time. So now we will move on to the Q&A round. The first question is by Manish Ji. The question is harvested rainwater good and safe for families to drink?
So this depends on multiple factors, and I think a more technical person will be able to give you a more appropriate answer. But yes, I think like if properly harvested, then rainwater definitely is safe to drink. And even like I can give you like shocking examples from my own like study area and also my own place, like for example, East Kolkata wetlands. So it's wastewater, but the people, if they don't drink, but at least they eat the fish that is produced in those wetlands, and this is otherwise full of toxic materials and inorganic waste as well. But there are mechanisms through which this toxicity can be dealt with. And so far as rainwater is concerned, that amount or intensity of toxicity does not arise at all. So, and in Mothurapur 2 blocks, the ponds which were excavated, people used, the villagers used to drink that water. So these were used mainly for irrigation, but at the same time, the water was also used for drinking and other activities like, for example, fishery and then washing and several other activities as well. So I think yes, rainwater is safe to drink, but you need to have proper, technical management mechanisms, to, deal with it. And there are ample examples where people use the rainwater harvesting technique to kind of purify drinking water. Not purify, I mean, so they are purified sources of drinking water.
Abhijit Ji is asking, can you please list some funding agencies or NGOs in order to approach for getting funds in rainwater harvesting or ponds developments?
So is it like you are asking?
Is it possible to get funding from any agencies
or
or NGOs?
Context or the central level, the central government context?
The question is just general.
Okay, so if it is the state level context, then of course write an email to me. It's a good and also a bad news that I'm closely connected to some of the state level funding agencies. So where state is really interested to fund some of the projects because they have this integrated management plan now. So if you have interesting projects, again, this is the disclaimer is this, I'm talking from the West Bengal perspective. So if West Bengal is in your mind and if you have an innovative, interesting project, I think you can reach back to me, to us, and we can see how we can, kind of push this project to the proper funding agency.
The next question is by Prakash Ji. He's thanking you for the session and focusing on the practical aspects of actual implementation of RWH. Do you see any entrepreneurship opportunities in RWH in your areas? Do you see any startup possibility?
Yeah, so in my area now, my area has also become a bit complicated. So I stay in Kharagpur now in the campus, but I am originally from Kolkata. And honestly speaking, so far as these urban areas are concerned, rainwater harvesting, I don't see much hue and cry so far as these projects are concerned, pond excavation, etc. Because overall, all of us, we are quite aware that how the blue infrastructures, the water bodies of cities are really not doing good because the threat of hyper urbanization is there. Now, saying so, I would also like to discuss that there are few good things that are taking place now, but at the same time, they are not very sufficient. So yes, so far as my area is concerned, I don't see rainwater harvesting to be a very good, potential. And also, I will not be very happy to cite examples from those mega projects where you see like 50 storage buildings there is all these rooftop harvesting mechanisms are in full swing in those big multi-story buildings and apartments. And again, there's a lot of newspaper coverage, media coverage, and the the private project companies showcasing those buildings as proper, like examples that how eco-friendly we are, how resilient we are. But nobody ever questions that, these buildings have come up on the wetlands. So how are we, when even when we are pursuing rainwater harvesting, we should understand that it should not be a kind of, it should not be a lucrative, technological investment opportunity, but it is deeply anchored and connected to ecology and community needs and our entire survival. So if those fundamental principles are not taken care of, then like this face value, like rooftop harvesting on 50-story buildings, which draw like gallons and gallons of groundwater, and also make cities like Kolkata earthquake prone because it is on a seismic zone. There, we need to critically question that those projects, do they all really make any sense? So I don't see much opportunities in rainwater harvesting in my area.
Sunita ji is a representative from Green Innovation from IITK that helps save water and electricity in the drinking water space. Would you know of any innovation that helps in the rainwater harvesting space, maybe in terms of cost, retrofitting, or anything else?
Yes. So interesting and innovative projects are going on in our two main departments. So one is architecture department. So they are doing a lot of interesting work on rainwater harvesting in in the peripheral areas as well, and in other parts of the state and the country. So they have big funding projects that they are trying out with innovation. And there is also our School of Water Resources at IIT Kharagpur. So if you are interested, you can just write email to people like Renji Ramesh and all, we are the site, and they'll be very happy to discuss this technical question.
The last question is by Anuprita ji. Can forest policies be used as framework for rainwater harvesting?
I think you know the answer, and you just have kind of framed your statement into a question. So and of course the answer is yes. So and this is a very important and pertinent point, I think, because it is more important, and this is I would really like to thank Anuprita. I would really like to thank Anuprita for raising this question, because the sole focus, I think the sole focus should be on integrated ecosystem management. Because these days, if you are just discussing water body, or if you are just discussing, if we want to really be sincere with runoff, right? So we have to take into consideration several other factors. So rainwater is also not, separate from groundwater. Lot of work is going on in these intersections or interactions between surface water and groundwater. So similarly, forest, soil fertility, rainwater harvesting, all these are connected issues. And again, going back to our ancient days, so myself being a student of history, but also inhabiting these contemporary times and encountering historical distortions these days. But at the same time, I think that yes, ancient India did a good job in terms of rainwater harvesting, in terms of managing water, so that we did not hear this rainwater harvesting in our historical sources and documents. But there were like tank irrigation, well irrigation systems, surface water harvesting systems, which played very important role in meeting, in accomplishing the water needs of particular regions. So, and if you take a look into any of these harvesting infrastructures, you see that mainly, the fundamental crux of the systems were like integral ecosystem management principles. So, of course, forest is a very important part of rainwater harvesting project, and it cannot be a standalone project. The sustainability that we are continuously talking about, how can a project sustain itself for long? So this will depend on multiple other ecological resources as well, including forests.
Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee, for taking up all the questions. And once again, thank you very much for being part of this program. We look forward to have you as a guest in the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would also like to, share my heartfelt gratitude, offer my heartfelt gratitude to IMPRI, to Arjun, Simi, to you, and also all the participants who were here.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
So that was the end of the third session. Now, moving on to vote of thanks. As we come to end of day one of a 3-day immersive online certificate training program on implementing rainwater conservation, practitioners' perspectives on rainwater harvesting and efficient local water governance and resilience. This training course is organized by National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, and IMPRI's Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, or CECCSD, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute. I, Sauravi Ghimire, researcher at IMPRI, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, and IMPRI's Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, and National Institute for Disaster Management, or NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, India. We are grateful to our experts for the day one of this training, Dr. Anamika Barua, Dr. Indira Khurana, and Dr. Jenia Mukherjee. We thank the patron for the program, Shri Taj Hassan, convener and moderator, Shri Tikender Singh Panwar. Our conveners, Professor Dr. Anil K. Gupta, Dr. Simi Mehta, and Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively involved in today's deliberation. We welcome you again tomorrow on 2nd of August for our day 2 session of this excellent training course by distinguished set of experts, Dr. Fauzia Taranum, Anjali Makhija, and Dr. Brajesh Kumar Dubey. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good day and thank you.